Awareness is a strange kind of light, not the warm kind that guides you gently through the dark, but a ceiling light that never turns off. It illuminates everything, every pause, every shift in tone, every fracture beneath the surface, even when you're exhausted, even when your soul wants rest, softness, or the comfort of not knowing. Most people move through life with the lights dimmed just enough to function. They notice what they need to notice, and no more. But some minds don't have that switch. For them, awareness is always on. And while that might sound like intelligence or depth, it often feels like living without curtains. Nothing fades, nothing blurs, nothing truly disappears. When you're too aware, you don't just experience moments, you monitor them. You sense what's unspoken before words arrive. You feel tension before it has a name. You notice when something is off, long before anyone admits it is. And even in quiet, even in stillness, your mind keeps scanning. Reading, interpreting. It's not because you want to overthink. It's because your nervous system doesn't know how to stop looking. And here's the paradox most people miss. This level of awareness isn't always a gift. Sometimes, it's a form of wakefulness that never learned how to rest. A mind that learned to stay alert so well, it forgot how to sleep while awake. That's where this story really begins. For the overly aware mind, life isn't a series of simple moments. It's an equation, quiet, invisible, and constantly running in the background. Every interaction becomes something to solve, not out of suspicion, but instinct. You don't just hear what someone says, you notice how long they paused before saying it. You don't just register a smile, you catch the half second it faded too early. You don't just read a message, you feel the weight of what wasn't written. Why did they say it that way? Why now and not earlier? Why does this room feel different today, even though everything looks the same? While others are present in the moment, your mind is working behind the scenes, connecting dots, tracking patterns, updating its internal model of the world. It's like living with a second screen always open. One side of you is participating, the other is observing, calculating, adjusting. A casual text isn't just a text. A delayed reply isn't just timing. A shift in tone isn't just mood. It's data. And this constant analysis is exhausting, not because it's negative, but because it never shuts off. Your brain treats social reality the way an engineer treats a system. If something changes, there must be a reason. So you search for it. You replay conversations. You scan for inconsistencies. You try to understand what's happening beneath the surface so you can stay oriented, prepared, safe. The irony is that none of this feels dramatic from the inside. It feels responsible, thoughtful, even necessary. But over time, something subtle happens. The equation starts to replace the experience. You're so busy solving what life means that you're rarely allowed to simply be inside it. And slowly, without realizing it, presence gets traded for precision. There's a particular kind of awareness that doesn't just observe the world, it observes itself. Psychology calls this metacognition, the ability to think about your own thinking. For most people, it flickers on occasionally. For the overly aware, it rarely turns off. You don't just feel an emotion, you immediately notice that you're feeling it. Then you ask why. Then you evaluate whether that feeling makes sense. Then you wonder what it says about you. By the time the emotion has finished moving through your body, your mind has already dissected it from every angle. Sadness doesn't arrive alone. It comes with questions. Is this justified? Is this proportional? Is this old, or is this about now? Even joy isn't spared. You can feel happy and almost simultaneously step outside of it, watching yourself be happy, wondering how long it will last or what might interrupt it. It's like dancing while constantly checking your reflection in the mirror. You may perfect the steps, but you lose the music. This second layer of observation creates depth, but it also creates distance, Because when you're always watching yourself, you're rarely fully inside the moment. You're half living, half monitoring, half feeling, half narrating. Over time, this turns inner life into a kind of quiet surveillance. Your thoughts are watched, your emotions are reviewed, your reactions are filtered before they're allowed to land. What began as self-awareness slowly becomes self-interruption, and the hardest part is that it feels intelligent, responsible, mature. But the mind was never meant to be both the dancer and the critic at the same time. When thinking turns inward like this, it doesn't just reflect, it loops. And in that loop, spontaneity starts to disappear. At some point, awareness stops being a lens and becomes a revelation. You begin to see behind the curtain of human behavior, and once you do, something quietly changes. You notice that people don't always mean what they say, that kindness can carry conditions, that affection sometimes comes with unspoken expectations. You realize that many interactions aren't just about connection, but about reassurance, control, image, or fear. Not because people are cruel, but because they're human. And with that understanding comes a subtle kind of loss. When you see too deeply, it becomes harder to enjoy things at face value. Compliments feel layered, apologies feel incomplete, promises sound tentative even when they're sincere. You can still appreciate the moment, but there's always an awareness of what might be happening underneath it. This is where a quiet grief begins, the grief of losing innocence. Not childhood innocence, but relational innocence. The ability to take words as words, gestures as gestures, love as something uncomplicated. Once you've seen how often people contradict themselves, how fear disguises itself as confidence, how love and insecurity can exist side by side, you can't fully unsee it. Relationships start to feel like a dance between projection and perception. Communication becomes something you translate instead of receive. You understand that most conversations are miscommunication dressed as agreement, and that insight, while accurate, can be isolating. Because when you see behind the curtain, you're no longer just watching the play. You're aware of the strings, the lighting, the fragile mechanics holding everything together. And even when the performance is beautiful, part of you knows how easily it could fall apart. That knowledge doesn't make you cynical. It makes you careful, and sometimes a little lonely. For people who are deeply aware, empathy isn't something they turn on. It's always running in the background, like a system that never goes to sleep. You don't just listen to what people say, you feel the emotional weight beneath it. You sense when someone is holding back. You notice the shift in their posture, the tightness in their voice, the moment their eyes look away. Long before anything is spoken, you already know something is wrong. Psychology often calls this cognitive empathy, the ability to understand another person's inner world without being explicitly told. But for the overly aware, it goes beyond understanding. It becomes absorption. Emotions don't stop at the edge of your awareness. They move into you. A tense room leaves your chest tight. A friend's unspoken sadness follows you home. Someone else's discomfort lingers in your body long after the conversation ends. This is what people rarely see from the outside. To them, you seem calm, emotionally intelligent, grounded. You're the one who reads between the lines, who chooses words carefully, who knows when to pause and when to soften your tone. You're often the one others feel safe with because you make them feel seen. But there's a cost to that kind of empathy. When you're always tuned in to everyone else's emotional frequency, you begin to carry feelings that were never yours to begin with. You sense guilt, tension, disappointment, even when no one asks you to. And because you understand where those feelings come from, you rarely push them away. You hold them, you manage them, you regulate the room. Over time, this creates a quiet imbalance. You become the emotional container, absorbing, translating, smoothing. And while this looks like strength, it often leads to exhaustion. Because when you're always the one who understands, no one thinks to check whether you need understanding too. Empathy that never powers down doesn't just connect you to others, it slowly teaches you to disappear inside that connection. And that's when awareness begins to feel heavy, not because you care too much, but because you're carrying more than one nervous system at a time. Awareness doesn't live only in the mind. For many people who are overly aware, it lives in the body first. Psychology calls this interoception, the ability to sense internal states like heartbeat, breath, tension, or shifts in energy. Everyone has it, but in some nervous systems it's turned up high, very high. You don't just feel anxious, you notice your heart rate change before the thought arrives. You sense the tightening in your chest, the shallow breath, the subtle drop in your stomach. These sensations register as information, and your mind immediately starts interpreting them. Something is wrong, something is coming. This is where awareness can quietly tip into anxiety. When the body becomes a constant data stream, every sensation starts to feel meaningful. A flutter becomes a warning, fatigue becomes a signal, restlessness becomes a problem to solve. The line between a passing sensation and a threat begins to blur. The irony is that this sensitivity didn't develop to harm you. It developed to protect you. A body that learned to stay alert, learned to detect shifts early. But without guidance, interoception can turn inward and amplify distress. The nervous system starts scanning itself the way it once scanned the environment. Over time, this creates a loop. Sensation triggers interpretation. Interpretation triggers tension. Tension creates more sensation. And suddenly the body feels loud, crowded with signals that never fully settle. Understanding this matters. Because the goal isn't to feel less. It's to learn which sensations need attention and which ones can simply pass through without being turned into a story. This level of awareness doesn't appear out of nowhere. It has a history. For many people, hyper-awareness begins in childhood. Not as a trait, but as an adaptation. In environments where emotions were unpredictable, where moods could shift without warning, or where safety depended on reading subtle cues, awareness wasn't optional. It was necessary. As a child, you may have learned to scan the room the moment you walked in, to notice the tone before the words, to feel the emotional temperature before deciding how to speak, or whether to speak at all. You learned when to become quiet, when to be agreeable, when to disappear just enough to stay safe. No one taught you this explicitly. Your nervous system learned it for you. When a child grows up needing to anticipate emotional shifts, their brain becomes highly attuned to patterns. The prefrontal cortex learns to predict. The body learns to stay alert. Over time, vigilance turns into awareness, and awareness becomes identity. You don't think of yourself as someone who's watching. You think of yourself as someone who's responsible. This is where many overly aware adults misunderstand themselves. They assume they're overthinking because something is wrong with them. But what they're experiencing is the residue of intelligence shaped by survival. Their sensitivity wasn't born from fragility. It was forged in adaptation. The tragedy is that what once kept you safe doesn't always know when to stand down. As an adult, your environment may be stable, your relationships may be calm, but your nervous system still operates as if something could change at any moment. So it keeps scanning, it keeps listening, it keeps preparing. This is why awareness often comes with exhaustion. You're not tired because life is too demanding. You're tired because your system never learned that it's allowed to rest. Understanding this origin changes everything. It replaces self-judgment with context. It allows compassion to enter where criticism used to live. You weren't born overly aware. You became this way because paying attention once mattered. And the goal now isn't to erase that awareness. It's to teach it that the danger has passed, even if the sensitivity remains. That's where healing begins. At a certain point, awareness stops being observation and quietly becomes control. Not control in the obvious sense, no domination, no manipulation, but an internal strategy. If you can predict what people will do, if you can anticipate emotional shifts before they happen, maybe you won't be caught off guard. maybe nothing will hurt as much. This is where hyper-awareness turns into a form of preparation. Your mind runs simulations constantly. If they pull away, you'll already know why. If the mood changes, you'll already be braced. If something ends, you'll have seen it coming. Understanding becomes armor. But there's a cost to this kind of vigilance. To stay prepared, you have to step slightly outside of life. You stop fully inhabiting moments because you're too busy tracking where they might lead. Joy arrives and part of you is already watching for the drop. Connection forms, and your mind starts calculating distance, timing, probability. This is how awareness feeds analysis paralysis. Every decision carries weight. Every action is filtered through potential outcomes. You've already lived 10 versions of the future before the present has finished unfolding. So you hesitate, you delay, not because you don't care, but because you care so deeply that you're trying to protect yourself from regret, loss, or surprise. What's ironic is that this attempt at control often produces the very exhaustion it's trying to avoid. The mind stays tense, the body stays ready, and life starts to feel like something you're managing instead of something you're participating in. Awareness, when used this way, doesn't create safety, it creates distance, because the more you try to outthink uncertainty, the less room there is to experience anything without conditions. And slowly, without realizing it, protection replaces presence. The solution to over-awareness isn't seeing less, it's carrying less. For a long time, awareness may have felt like a responsibility. If you noticed something, you felt obligated to interpret it, to respond to it, to manage it. But not every signal is an assignment. Not every shift requires action, and not every insight needs to be followed to its conclusion. This is where awareness begins to mature into something gentler. Learning to see without carrying everything means developing selective perception. The ability to notice without absorbing, to recognize without reacting, to let certain things pass through your awareness instead of lodging inside it. There are a few quiet truths that help recalibrate the system. Not every silence is a message. Sometimes people are just tired, distracted, or overwhelmed. Not every feeling needs action. Emotions can move through you without being solved, explained, or fixed. And not every insight needs expression. Some understandings are meant to be held, not shared, not acted on, not analysed further. This isn't about becoming careless or indifferent. It's about restoring balance. Awareness without boundaries turns into suffering. Awareness with boundaries becomes clarity. When you stop treating every perception as urgent, your nervous system begins to relax. The body learns that noticing doesn't equal danger. The mind learns that it doesn't have to stay one step ahead to be safe. This shift takes practice. It can feel uncomfortable at first, like loosening a grip you've relied on for years. But slowly, something changes. You begin to experience moments without immediately stepping outside of them. You laugh without checking why. You feel without translating. You listen without preparing a response. You don't lose your depth this way. You reclaim your presence. And awareness, instead of weighing you down, starts to feel like a quiet companion rather than a constant burden. Awareness doesn't need to disappear to bring you peace. It needs to be refined. When awareness is softened by acceptance, it stops feeling like a spotlight and starts feeling like warmth. You no longer try to control every outcome or decode every silence. You begin to trust that not everything requires understanding to be meaningful. Some moments are meant to be felt, not explained. This is where awareness turns into wisdom. You still notice deeply, but you don't cling. You still feel intensely, but you let emotions move through without interrogating them. You understand people without losing yourself inside their stories. Presence replaces prediction. Curiosity replaces fear. And something quiet but powerful happens. Life becomes lighter, not because it's simpler, but because you're no longer carrying it all at once. If this felt familiar, if you recognized yourself somewhere in this awareness, you're not alone. This channel is a space for people who feel deeply and think carefully about the human mind. If you found value here, consider subscribing so we can continue these conversations together. And if any part of this spoke to you, leave a comment below. Your experience might be the clarity someone else needs to feel understood.